Hi, Shiona.
Hi, Fiona.
Thanks for joining me today. We've got an impromptu live here.
Thanks very much for inviting me.
No, it's been great. It's great. So, Shiona, first of all, I'm going to ask you a few questions about yourself and your business, and then we're going to move on to some hints and tips that you're going to kindly offer us for business owners. So, your business is Business Development and Support Limited, and the work that you do is mainly to help business owners grow their businesses by securing public sector work, which I think for some would be right in saying that work can be quite lucrative, but it can be a bit of a minefield to know where to start and how to get involved in it.
Yeah, you're completely right. It can be really, really lucrative for businesses, and a lot of businesses don't even consider it. But it can be, it's a process that you have to go through, but often the fact that it's a process puts people off.
So how did you get started in this business? Shiona, you've got a business development background, and a couple of years ago you decided to set up yourself. What was going through your head and how did that come about?
Well, I'd worked in the public sector for over 15 years, not involved in procurement, and left there and started working with charities. And I began, when I've been in the public sector, I've been doing grant applications to keep an externally funded project that I managed, to keep the income coming for that.
Yeah.
So I then moved over to charities, and they do a lot of grant funding to keep themselves going. So I got involved in that in the first charity I worked in. But then I moved on to, and I worked for Scotland's biggest social care charity, and they don't do any fundraising. Well, they do very little fundraising. They turn over £60 million a year, and there are some fundraisers like coffee mornings and whatnot, but they bring in very, very little money compared to like the 60 million they can bring in. So the rest of the money they bring in is, and the majority of the money is through public sector contracts that were won. So within that charity, I was part of the team who looked for opportunities, applied for them, and submitted the bids. So I started doing it like that. I moved on to another charity doing much the same work. And then I realised that there was so much opportunity, and I began working for others. I was involved where we were identifying opportunities, scoping them, and then not doing anything with it. And it got really, really frustrating. So because I was on about the systems every day, I could see the opportunities that were there. And I thought, actually, I could be doing this for other people in a different way. So I went part-time first of all, and then gave up my job quite quickly. So started BDS in 2017.
Right. And just for people who are watching that maybe don't fully understand what exactly public sector work is, could you give us a brief description on what that could be for somebody?
Well, more people than you realise don't actually understand what the public sector is. So the public sector is any publicly funded organisation. So it ranges from local councils to central government departments like Ministry of Defence and Education, but it also goes to smaller kind of arm's length but publicly funded bodies. So a tender that I was looking at the other day was, I can't pronounce the organisation it was for, but basically it's the organisation that influences the speaking of Gaelic within Scotland, and they employ 22 members of staff. So there's also organisations that are that small.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, it ranges completely, and the public sector has to buy everything. That ranges from stationery, so pens and pencils, to major infrastructure projects like building motorways, also schools, all that kind of stuff. But it also involves like services that are provided, because a lot of stuff's been outsourced. So I help quite a few people. And well, my background from working with the charities was social care, so that's care that's delivered in people's homes.
Right.
So yeah, a whole range of services, and people don't realise quite what they do sell. So I've been helping people in the last couple of years get into working with schools. So every school in Scotland's to close the attainment gap, and there's a whole range of services that you can deliver for that. So I've worked with people that offer like mindfulness support within schools. Right. And services like that. So
Yeah, and of course things like maintenance as well. So if it's tradespeople that are watching, you know, you can help with that, maybe maintenance, electrician work, these types of things as well.
Yeah, a whole range of maintenance stuff. So that tends, the kind of more lucrative market for that is housing associations,
Right.
which are still the public sector.
Uh-huh.
So there's a tender out at the moment for a number of housing associations who have clubbed together, and they've lotted it, so they've split it into different parts, and they want more than one supplier for each part. So there's like kitchen installations, bathroom installations, and these are each separate parts, landscaping. So loads and loads of opportunity out there for tradespeople.
And what do you think puts people off going for these opportunities?
There's a number of different things. So some people feel they're too small, and
Yeah.
that's not true, because I've worked with people who are like single people businesses, and they've won contracts.
Uh-huh.
And I've won a contract myself, and I am my business. But I've won 2 contracts. Then there's also people, so they think they're too small. They don't really understand what the public sector buys, so don't necessarily think that they buy the type of goods that they sell. And also then the whole process puts people off. Mm-hmm. So even just like talking about it and talking about procurement and tenders aren't necessarily terminology that people automatically understand.
Yes. Yeah.
But of course, the public sector, so the UK government have a target that a third of all spend by 2022 will be spent with SMEs. So that's small and medium-sized businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So that's businesses that employ up to 249 people. So right. A third of the spend's a huge amount of money. In Scotland alone, they spend, I wrote it down earlier, spend last year was £14.2 billion.
My goodness.
Gosh. So a lot of money there.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, there is a bit of upfront work involved in preparing yourself for bidding for some of these projects, isn't there? And I guess that's maybe a hurdle for somebody, which is why you come in, because you can help with, you know, ticking all the boxes and showing that, you know, they're in a position that they can work safely for that company.
Yeah, there is. So you won't just get handed work, you'll have to prepare a bid. But as you say, there is work you can do beforehand. And if you do the right work beforehand, then it makes it much easier. So when you see any opportunities, I think it's easier to then review them and see if they're the right opportunity for you. So to me, a lot of it is a bit like the most important thing is actually properly scoping anything to understand what's been looked for, what you can provide, and if the two marry up. Mm-hmm. So, but there's things you can do like knowing understanding what you would want to sell to the public sector, understanding the public bodies that might buy from you, then understanding where they advertise their opportunities, and then making sure that you have signed up to the portals that they use, and that you've so for smaller value opportunities in Scotland, you can get invited to what's called a quick quote, and you need to have a supplier finder profile registered on the system to be invited to that. But it's a relatively simple thing to do. And I'm saying small value, that's contracts for goods and services that are worth less than £50,000.
Right.
So for a small business, £50,000 contract isn't small.
Sure, definitely not. No, that's great. And so how do people find out where these portals are? Is there a central place that they can register, or is it a case of all the different organisations have different portals?
In Scotland, it's easy.
Right.
So in Scotland, all opportunities must be advertised on a website called, a portal called Public Contracts Scotland. So that's publiccontractscotland.gov.uk. And all opportunities must be on there.
Right.
If it's over £50,000, then it must be publicly advertised. But below the 50,000, then it can be by invite only, which is where the supplier finder profile comes in.
Okay.
In England and Wales, any opportunities over £10,000 must be advertised on a website, a portal called Contract Finder.
Right.
But they are only advertised on that. They're not administered on that. So in Scotland, it's an easier thing because you'll get the whole contract notice on there.
Uh-huh.
So, and then in England, so although they're all advertised there, there's then different portals. So the Ministry of Defence has their own portal. There's a portal for Northwest, universities and colleges have their own portal, so it can get quite confusing then.
Yeah, yeah. So where would you suggest somebody started if they're thinking, look, you know, public sector's potentially where I could find some work? What's the first thing that they should be doing?
The first thing I'd recommend somebody does is sign up to the Public Contract Scotland portal and have a good look about it. There's people like me that can guide you through it. I'm quite happy to have a quick chat with people, and I would normally take them through the website and see if there's opportunities either currently advertised or have been advertised to give people a bit of an idea. It's a relatively simple website to use. If people think that they're definitely wanting to sell to the public sector, then I would complete the supplier finder profile and make sure it's published. So one of the contracts I won is advising businesses on procurement for a council. And the first thing that they got me in to do was sit with businesses for an hour at a time and reviewing their supplier finder profile, but most importantly, making sure it was live. Because when that council were going looking for suppliers locally, they found that, well, they couldn't always find suppliers.
Yeah,
and that was so some of them didn't have supplier finder profiles.
Some of these organisations then are actually quite restricted by this process, and they maybe can't find what they actually need, and they're crying out for businesses to bid for them for the work.
Yeah, which is definitely the feedback that I got for that first bit of work that I did for that council. So each public body has, in Scotland, are what are called standing orders, which dictate how they must purchase goods. So it'll tell you up to certain values what they must do. So for like really low value, so up to about 2,500, then they'll need to get 3 quotes. In East Barnshire, they would need to get 3 quotes.
Right.
Then between the 2.5 and the 50, then they would have to ask for a quick quote through the Public Contract Scotland system.
Okay.
And actually in East Barnshire, I had a quick look at the stats before I come on with you today. They've advertised in the last 6 months 13 opportunities, and 12 of them have been done through the quick quote system. So only one, if you go and look on Public Contract Scotland, would be you'd find. So, but that's all part of the systems that they must follow. So they can't just go buying from anybody.
Right.
And then, sorry, I forgot about this. Once they are choosing people, they're told they must invite at least 5 through that. One must be a local company, one must be a company they've not used before, and one must be an SME, so a small or medium-sized business.
Okay.
So this is all opportunities that are open to you.
Yeah. So it's all set up really to help businesses get involved in this and potentially create some work for themselves.
There's been a lot of changes in the last few years to make it so, yes. And I have spoken to a few buyers who've told me that they've not been able to find the companies that they wanted to meet these demands. So like when you look at Public Contract Scotland, there's lots of information available, and there's different types of notices published. So one type of notice is a contract award notice, or also a quick quote award notice, and they tell you who's won contracts, but they'll also, if you look at them, tell you how many tenders they received.
Right.
So you can often see ones that they've only had a couple of tenders. So there is lots of opportunity there for businesses if they're only receiving a couple of tenders.
Yeah. And to get on the initial database then, Shiona, is there a lot of proprietary work that they need to do to be at a certain level? And then when they're at that level, they can sort of actively bid for the various projects?
Right. So a lot of people think that they need to have certain policies, procedures, all that kind of stuff in place. If you look at a contract notice, so this is something that tells you, that's telling you about an opportunity. So that's basically the advert for it. It should detail any prerequisites that they have.
Okay.
So often the prerequisites are around about the turnover of the company. But that's actually reducing slightly the amount they ask for that. So that would have been before they would have. So if the contract value was £10,000, they would look for a company that had turned over 20,000 for the last 2 years.
Okay.
But now actually what they're doing is more credit scoring.
Right.
So they want to make sure that you're a company that's not losing money and that you're a good bet for them, because it's all about them risk assessing
work as well. Because if you've only done 10 grand's work before and then you're looking for a 20 grand contract, they need to know you've got the infrastructure and the resource there to be able to manage it, I suppose.
That's true, yes. So this also then details, so the finance is probably one of the most important bits, but it should also tell you if you need like memberships and accreditations within it.
Right.
So for tradespeople, they might look for CHAS. Can't remember what that stands for. Accreditation, safe contractor, accreditations like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll be asked for like ISO 9001 or ISO 14001,
right.
But more often than not, it will say or equivalent, or like how else can you demonstrate this? So by having the appropriate quality policy or environmental management policy, that actually demonstrates that to them.
Yeah.
So there's sometimes ways around that.
And presumably that's related to turnover as well, because if you've got a low turnover and you're just one person, they're not going to expect you to have ISO or something like that in place.
Yeah, rather than turnover, it's related to the risk of the contract.
Right, okay.
And yeah, like you said, smaller value contracts aren't going to be as risky for that organisation. But so my background's working with like in the care sector. Yeah. And none of the two charities I worked for and then the organisations I've worked for since then, none of them have had any quality accreditation.
Right.
So which you would expect, because that's a really high risk sector. And that's not been required.
When they get the bids in and they're assessing them, do you get to understand what they are assessing them and what they're looking for?
Yeah, so so once you've reviewed the contract notice, you would then note interest in the opportunity.
Okay.
And once you've done that, you can access sometimes it's one document. I have seen it been like 20 documents before. So you can access the documents behind that. And as part of the documentation behind it, there will be an evaluation document, and it will tell you how the opportunity is going to be evaluated.
Right.
So the evaluation, they can't award it on price alone. They must take into account other aspects. So they normally call this quality. So that's not necessarily the quality of the work, but the quality of how you say you're going to deliver the service.
Yeah.
So it'll tell you the percentage of weighting towards the price and then the percentage of weighting to the quality score.
Right.
And then that'll be then further split down. So often it would be like methodology. So that's just really how you're going to deliver the service or what goods you're providing. There could also be a kind of customer service question about complaints, that kind of thing. And sometimes you get very few questions, and then other times you can get maybe 15 or 16, and it's not directly related to the contract value. I think it's often just the process they have internally. So the quality cost split varies hugely. I've seen about 95% price and 5% quality, and I've also seen tenders been awarded 100% on quality and cost not coming into it.
And as you said before, that just is based on risk, I suppose.
Yeah. So the first tender I did when I worked in the charity was for a supported living accommodation. So this was 24/7 care, and it was individuals being looked after within it. It was new accommodation that the local authority had bought. It was individual houses. I think it was 5 people in the one, and they all had autism.
Right.
So I can't remember. I think it was probably a 70-30 split. So 70 quality, 30 price.
Right.
And we got 100% for a quality answer, which would indicate there was nothing we could have done for that to be any better.
Yeah.
And we didn't win that tender because somebody bid lower in with the evaluation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But I mean, it is a fairer method at the end of the day, isn't it? Because, you could have no paperwork and be a bit fly by night and go in cheap and win the award and then not be able to follow through the contract, or, vice versa, not be able to deliver.
Yes.
So that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say then are the key benefits at the moment to businesses for getting public sector work?
The key thing to me is that the public sector must pay all suppliers within 30 days, 30
Right.
calendar days.
It was a big thing, yeah.
Yeah, really big thing, yeah. And in 2017-18, I've not seen stats since then, the Scottish public sector paid 99% of valid invoices within 10 working days.
Wow.
So they paid their invoices within 2 weeks.
My goodness.
Amazing. That turnover is good. That
sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah, really good opportunity for people.
Mm-hmm.
And also they're not a bad credit risk. They'll always pay you after you've delivered, but you're always going to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment with COVID, there's been notices going out to public bodies telling them that they must pay invoices quicker if needs be, and it's all about keeping the economy going.
Yeah.
So if you have a contract at the moment and you go to them and say, we need this money quicker, then the public sector body should be doing all they can to give you that.
Okay.
So that's probably
the responsible employers and responsible service. What's the word I'm looking for? They're not providing, but you know what I mean. They're responsible and ethical, I suppose.
Yes. So you will always get it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is that there's always opportunity there within the public sector. I think because of the way the economy is going to go, then there'll be more competition within that. Mm-hmm. But I also think the government will pump more money in, so there will still be opportunities there. I know we've spoken quite a bit about the whole process, but although it is a process you have to follow, once you've mastered that, once you understand it, then it's actually just a process you follow again and again.
Yes.
So it's something that might take a bit of mastering on behalf of a business, but it is something they can implement.
Yeah.
And again, I wouldn't say cut and paste answers from opportunity to opportunity, but there is information you can swap from opportunity to opportunity.
Yeah, and some of it, I suppose, like health and safety policies and things, is transferable. Albeit you would need to, go into the detail for certain activities and things like that. But having those sorts of things in place is a lot of the work already done.
Yeah, so your policies and procedures, you don't change it from tender to tender. It's just the answers behind that. So if they ask you what, like health and safety, I'm trying to think how they would word it, like how you would deal with health and safety in relation to a certain scenario, then I wouldn't cut and paste that into the next one, because you'll probably find there's been slight changes in it from one to the other.
Okay.
So somebody I worked with, we did 2 tenders. It was they were a couple of months apart for the exact same service. It was associate trainers in colleges, and they said to me, "Oh, we'll just cut and paste the whole answer from one to another." But it was about the methodology, so how you were going to deliver. And the first answer, they wanted 300 words for it, and the second, they wanted 500. Right. So if we cut and paste that, there was a chance we missed out huge chunks of what the second one was looking for. No. And also, when you looked at it, the specification was different. So you want to tailor it for your audience.
Yeah, and then I suppose if they weren't successful in the first instance, they might need to change it, obviously, for the second time.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to mention that when you asked about the evaluations. So once you've submitted a tender, you'll be told whether you've been successful or not. And whether you're successful or not, I would always ask for feedback, because there's always ways that you can improve something and changes you can make. So I would always have asked for that from the first one. But you also need to look at the documentation to make sure that it's an identical service.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose people may be thinking, oh, it sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money and resource to bid for something. But as you say, once you've got the hang of it, you become better at it and quicker at it. And it is lucrative if you can get the work and get in there and start to win contracts.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, once you've got it there, like I tend to work with people and develop bid libraries. So like getting your accounts information together, information you'll always be asked for. So having that in the one place saves you time. But just as you get more familiar with it, like I can review a tender in an hour and a half and get a good idea of what it's about and represent that to a client. And give them enough information that they know if they're going to bid for it or not. So it's just all about, as you become more familiar with it, then you understand more about it and get more of an idea about exactly how long it'll take and what's needed and what's been asked for, or what clarifications to seek.
Yeah.
So
sounds good. So if somebody's watching this, Shiona, and they're thinking, yeah, I want to do this, this sounds like perfect for me, how do they get in touch with you?
You can, well, if anybody's interested in it at all, I've got a free Facebook group. So if anybody was interested, they're welcome to join that and get a bit more of an idea behind there, or pop me a message on LinkedIn, and I don't mind having a chat with anybody, no obligation, and talking them through, getting them to tell me a bit about their business and talking them through the process.
Yeah, and I suppose even just find out what opportunities may or may not be there for them, because there might not be something that suits them, but there could be a whole host of things that they just never imagined that they could sort of fit what they do. Yeah.
Sometimes it surprises me when I meet people and I'm thinking, I don't know if there'll be much for them. And then you start doing the searches and you're like, actually there's this or that.
Yeah. I mean, when you start to think about it, it could really be anything. It could be hygiene products, stationery, like you said, it could be surveying properties, for example, or managing properties, all kinds of things. And the one you mentioned, going into schools and doing wellness and things like that as well. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of stuff that's out there that's getting procured.
There's hardly anything that people sell that the public sector wouldn't buy, I think.
Right, okay. Well, that's been fantastic, Shiona. I think that's really, really useful information for people, and I hope that people do lift the phone, because it's good opportunity, especially now. We're not sure what's going to happen with the market moving forward. So if there is opportunities out there, then local business owners, get on to Shiona and find out what there is for you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No, I love your background, Shiona.
Oh. That was the work I was doing. I got a green screen.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's part of a contract I won. So it's not directly the contract I won, but I won a contract with a college and another department within the college. We're looking for somebody to deliver training in China, and I ended up winning that. And as a result, it was delivered the last few weeks. So I'm in a back bedroom, so I got a green screen to have a better background.
That looks amazing. Yeah, I know. I think everyone's sick of my background. I'm looking forward to being able to get the kids back in nursery and things, and maybe be able to move around about a wee bit more. But I think everybody feels like that just now.
I think so, yeah. But I think people are quite forgiving of where people are having to work at the moment.
Yeah. It's definitely been the best time to get live videos done, that's for sure. Yeah. So thanks so much for joining me, Shiona. I'll pop your contact details above the post so that anyone watching later can go and click straight into your Facebook page. And thanks again for the information. That's really valuable.
Thanks very much for the opportunity. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shiona. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.